The Thanksgiving feast at Maggie Sullivan's Boulder home shimmered with excess. Crystal glasses clinking, a mahogany table laden with glazed ham, sweet potato casserole, and towering pecan pies. Laughter swirled, warm and loud, as Sophie and Ethan, Maggie's favored grandchildren, twirled through the crowd in their holiday best. But 8-year-old Lila Harper stood apart, her emerald green dress a quiet rebellion against the festive din, her hands clutching a silver-wrapped box like a secret, ready to explode. "Grandma, this is for you," she declared, her voice slicing the chatter. "From Dad. For when you make me feel like I'm not family." The room choked on its own joy, and every eye turned to her. Elena Harper, froze by the dessert table, a forkful of pie suspended, my pulse hammering. Maggie, the unchallenged queen of this suburban palace, stood at the table's head, her silk blouse pristine, her smile a practiced mask. She orchestrated the evening with flair, doling out gifts like royal decrees. Sophie unwrapped a glittering smartwatch, her squeal sparking applause. Ethan tore into a sleek drone, his grin met with cheers. Then Maggie's gaze flicked to Lila, her warmth cooling, and she handed over a flimsy dollar store notebook, its cover already creased. "Something to scribble in," she said, the words sharp, dismissive. The crowd didn't blink, lost in the holiday haze. But Lila's eyes burned, and I felt Noah, my husband, tense beside me. His silence a storm brewing. Lila didn't waver. Her small frame, dwarfed by the room's grandeur, carried a weight that stilled the air. She stepped forward, the silver box gleaming in her hands, and her words landed like a spark in dry grass. Maggie's laugh was brittle, her fingers twitching as she took the box, her eyes darting for an escape. "What's this, dear?" she asked, her tone too bright, too thin. Lila said nothing, her gaze unwavering, as if daring Maggie to open it. The chatter dissolved, glasses stilled, and a heavy quiet pressed in, thick with anticipation. Maggie's hand hovered over the wrapping, her smile faltering, the crowd leaning closer. Sensing a crack in her perfect world, Noah's hand found mine, his grip a lifeline, his eyes locked on Lila. He knew what lay inside that box, a truth we'd buried under years of forced smiles. I couldn't look away from my daughter, her courage aflame in the dim glow of Maggie's chandelier. This wasn't the Thanksgiving I'd planned. When we settled in Boulder, Noah and I envisioned a life stitched into his family's fabric. Lila running through Maggie's manicured lawn with her cousins, her laughter part of their story. Maggie's home, with its polished floors and curated warmth, promised that. But promises break, and Maggie's love was a currency Lila could never earn. Sophie and Ethan basked in her affection, while Lila got leftovers, scraps of attention, second-hand gifts, a pat instead of a hug. I tried to pretend it was enough, that Maggie's oversight was just her way, not a rejection. I told Lila Grandma was busy, that love didn't need grand gestures. But kids see through lies. Lila felt every slight, every moment Maggie's eyes skipped over her. And now, standing in that crowded dining room, she was done waiting for a place at Maggie's table. The silver box wasn't just a gift, it was her voice, ready to shatter the illusion we'd all clung to. Maggie's fingers brushed the wrapping, her breath shallow, and I braced myself for what came next, knowing our family would never be the same. I can still see the day we rolled into Boulder, our minivan stuffed with dreams and cardboard boxes. Lila's tiny fingers clutching a worn teddy bear as she gazed at the mountains. Noah and I were buzzing, picturing a life steeped in family Sunday brunches, backyard games. Lila growing up with cousins who'd feel like siblings. Maggie Sullivan's house, with its stone walkway and blooming lilacs, was the heart of that vision. She greeted us with a pitcher of sweet tea and a smile that promised warmth, her arms wide as she pulled Noah close. I thought we'd landed somewhere solid, a place where Lila could belong, but some promises are built on sand. Maggie was a whirlwind, a retired realtor whose charm could close any deal. She ruled her family with a velvet glove, her voice commanding attention at every gathering. At first, she played the part, praising my freelance designs, tucking a casserole recipe into my hands. But the warmth faded fast. She'd forget to loop me into family texts, her phone pinging with plans for Sophie's ballet or Ethan's baseball games. Never a word about Lila's art classes. Her words cut, soft but pointed. "You're so different, Elena," she'd say, her eyes implying I didn't match her blueprint of family. I swallowed it, convincing myself I was reading too much into her tone. Lila felt it worse. My daughter, legally Noah's since she was 3, was our son bright, fierce, ours in every way. Noah embraced fatherhood without hesitation, tying her sneakers, cheering at her recitals, framing her adoption papers like a trophy. She was his, no qualifiers. But Maggie drew a line. It started subtle, a birthday card for Sophie bursting with 20s, while Lila got a crumpled dollar bill. Easter egg hunts where Sophie and Ethan scooped up baskets of candy, and Lila found a single plastic egg, empty. Maggie's hugs enveloped her true grandkids. Lila got a quick squeeze, like an afterthought. Lila saw it all. Kids do. At a summer barbecue. She sat on the grass, watching Sophie and Ethan pile onto Maggie's lap for stories, their laughter ringing. Lila's balloon floated above her, alone, its string slack. "Mom," she whispered later, her voice thin, "does Grandma love me less?" My heart cracked. I mumbled something about Maggie being distracted, but the lie burned my tongue. I wanted to believe she'd soften, that time would knit Lila into her heart. But Maggie's love was a locked gate, and Lila was left outside. Noah noticed, though he stayed quiet at first, raised to keep Maggie's peace. But I'd catch his eyes darken when she handed Lila a thrift store book while Sophie got a new tablet. We'd argue in whispers after Lila's bedtime, my voice sharp with frustration. "She's your mom, Noah. Say something." He'd nod, vow to talk, then fall silent. I thought he was dodging, too tangled in loyalty. I didn't know he was biding his time, waiting for the right way to fight. The moments stacked up, each one a weight on Lila's spirit. At a family movie night, Maggie cheered Sophie's popcorn toss but ignored Lila's shy smile. At a winter party, she gave Sophie and Ethan monogrammed scarves. Lila got a plain beanie, no name, no care. I kept showing up, forcing cheer, baking brownies, thinking it was for Lila, for the family we craved. But I was fooling myself. I stayed silent to avoid being the outsider, the one who broke Maggie's perfect picture. Every time I bit my tongue, I taught Lila that love meant settling for crumbs. That was my failure. A shadow I couldn't outrun. Maggie's world ran on her terms, her affection a prize for those who fit her mold. Lila, with her adoption papers and her place in our hearts, didn't. She challenged Maggie's control, and Maggie pushed back, her slights a quiet war. As I stood in her dining room, watching Lila hold that silver box, I saw how long we'd fought for her scraps. But Lila wasn't begging anymore. She was ready to demand her seat, and I was finally ready to back her up. Maggie Sullivan's Thanksgiving table was a spectacle. a canvas of honey-glazed ham, cornbread stuffing, and cranberry sauce gleaming under the soft glow of her dining room chandelier. The Boulder house hummed with life uncles swapping fishing stories, aunts passing wine, Sophie and Ethan darting through the crowd with paper turkey hats. Maggie, radiant in her tailored blazer, held court, her laughter a melody that masked the cracks beneath. To the guests, it was a postcard holiday. To me, Elena Harper. It was a stage, and my daughter was about to upend the script. Maggie's gift-giving was her annual ritual, a spotlight moment she savored. She summoned Sophie first, her shining girl, presenting a smartwatch with a rose gold band that sparked gasps. Sophie's hug drew cheers, cameras flashing. Ethan bounded up next, ripping open a box to reveal a drone, its blades promising backyard glory. For my all-star, Maggie beamed, tousling his hair as the room roared. Then her eyes found Lila, my 8-year-old, sitting quietly in her emerald green dress, her hands folded like a shield. "Here, Lila," Maggie said, her voice smooth but edged, handing over a dollar store notebook, its neon cover warped, a tag reading Noah's Kid in hasty scrawl. Not granddaughter, not Lila, just a label that stung like frost. Lila accepted it, her fingers light, her face a mask hiding the hurt I knew too well. The room didn't pause, lost in Sophie's new toy, but I stood by the buffet, my nails digging into my palms. Noah, across the table, stared at Lila, his jaw tight, his fork untouched. The air felt heavy, like a storm about to break. Lila didn't speak. She set the notebook down, her eyes flickering with a quiet wound, the kind that festers in silence. I wanted to cross the room, to pull her close, but my feet were lead, trapped by years of biting my tongue. As pie was served, Lila slipped from her chair, wandering toward the living room where Maggie chatted with Claire, Noah's sister. I trailed her, my heart pounding, and caught Maggie's voice, low and cutting. Lila's sweet. Claire. But she's not really ours. You know, the words landed like a blade, sharp and deliberate. Lila stopped, her back stiff, her dress catching the light as she turned to me, her eyes brimming with a pain no child should carry. Claire shifted, mumbling something vague, but Maggie's words hung there, unchallenged. Lila walked back to the table, her steps measured, and sat beside Noah, her hands curling around the silver-wrapped box she'd brought. I followed, my chest tight, rage and guilt churning inside me. Noah leaned close to her, his whisper too soft to hear. But Lila nodded, her fingers tightening on the box like it was her anchor. In the kitchen later, as Maggie packed leftovers, I cornered Noah, my voice a furious hiss. She called Lila not ours. Noah a notebook labeled Noah's Kid. You can't let this go. My hands shook, tears burning my eyes. Noah's face was granite, but his voice was low, steady, carrying a weight I hadn't expected. I haven't. Elena, he said. I gave Lila that box months ago. It's got my letter, her adoption papers, a photo of us. I told her to use it when Mom crossed the line. She's choosing her moment. I stared, my anger melting into awe. You planned this. He nodded, his eyes fierce. Lila's ready, Elena. She's not as fragile as you think. I glanced at Lila, back at the table, the notebook ignored, the silver box in her lap, its shine a quiet promise. I'd spent years hoping Maggie would see Lila, would love her like Sophie and Ethan. But Noah had seen the truth first. And Lila, my brave girl, was carrying it forward. The notebook wasn't just a gift. It was Maggie's final slight, the spark that lit Lila's fire. As we left that night, the boulder cold nipping at our faces, Lila sat in the back seat, the notebook abandoned, the silver box held close. She didn't speak, but her silence wasn't surrender. It was strength, gathering like a wave. Maggie's words had cut deep, but they'd also freed something in Lila, in us. The holiday lights blurred past, but all I saw was my daughter, her resolve brighter than any chandelier, ready to claim the place Maggie tried to deny her. Days before Thanksgiving. Lila burst through our boulder front door, her backpack swinging, her eyes alight with pride. She tugged a poster board from her bag, its corners smudged with glitter, and spread it across the kitchen counter. "Mom, look at my family tree," she said, her voice bubbling. Elena Harper, leaned in, my heart catching at the sight. Noah, sketched with a goofy smile, labeled Dad in bright blue, me, Mom, with curly hair like Lila's, Sophie and Ethan, linked by crayon branches, and Maggie, Grandma, at the top in a sparkling heart. Every line was Lila's love, her claim to us, drawn in bold strokes. "It's amazing." "Lila," I said, pulling her close, her warmth easing the ache I carried. She grinned, then asked, "Can I show Grandma at brunch?" My smile faltered, Maggie's cold glances flashing in my mind. But Lila's hope was a tide I couldn't stem. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, my voice tight. Noah, stirring soup on the stove, met my eyes, his silence heavy with the same dread. We both knew Maggie's approval was a mirage, but Lila's heart was too full to dim. Sunday brunch at Maggie's house smelled of bacon and maple syrup, the dining room alive with clinking forks and Sophie's chatter about her new dance routine. Ethan boasted about a soccer trophy, Maggie nodding proudly, her laughter filling the space. Lila sat quietly, her poster rolled beside her, her emerald green dress a little creased but bright. After plates were cleared, she tugged my hand, her voice soft but sure. "Now." "Mom," I nodded, my stomach twisting, and shadowed her as she approached Maggie. "Grandma," Lila said, unrolling the poster with gentle hands. "I made our family tree for school." Her eyes searched Maggie's, hungry for a spark of warmth. Maggie glanced down, her smile thinning, her eyes scanning the colorful lines. Then she laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Sweet, Lila, but adopted kids don't belong on family trees. Do they? They're outside the roots." She shrugged, turning to refill her coffee, as if Lila's work was a scribble to toss aside. Lila stood frozen, her hands gripping the poster, its glitter dulling under Maggie's words. The room spun, on Ethan grabbed a muffin. Sophie giggled with an aunt, but I felt the world tilt, my breath short. Lila's joy collapsed, her shoulders curling inward, her eyes glistening. I wanted to scream, to shake Maggie, but my voice caught, trapped by years of silence. Lila rolled the poster up, her movements slow, and returned to her seat, her face blank, but her heart laid bare. That night, Lila sat on her bed, the poster hidden under her pillow, her voice a whisper. "Dad, am I really yours? Grandma said I'm outside." Noah knelt, his eyes fierce, his voice steady. "You're mine, Lila, in every way." He pulled her adoption papers from a drawer, the court seal bold, his name clear as her father. "This proves it. You're a Harper. Always." Lila's fingers traced the document, her breath steadying, a flicker of strength returning. I lingered in the doorway, my chest tight, watching Noah rebuild what Maggie tore down. Later, in the dark of our bedroom, he spoke, his voice low. "I gave Lila the silver box months ago. Elena, for when Mom goes too far, That family tree was her breaking point. I nodded, my eyes burning. The poster wasn't just a project, it was Lila's soul, offered and rejected. But it had sparked something fierce in her, a resolve Maggie couldn't crush. As Lila slept, the silver box by her side, I knew she was done seeking Maggie's heart. She was ready to fight for her own. The ride home from Maggie's Thanksgiving dinner was cloaked in silence. Boulder's snow-draped streets glowing under street lamps. The quiet, heavy with unspoken resolve. Lila sat in the back seat, her emerald green dress a faint shimmer. The silver-wrapped box cradled in her lap. The dollar store notebook left behind like a discarded lie. Elena Harper stole glances at Noah, his hands gripping the wheel, his eyes distant but fierce. Lila's voice broke the hush, small yet unyielding. I'm giving Grandma the box at the potluck tomorrow, she said. My heart stuttered, not with doubt, but with the fire in her words, an 8-year-old ready to rewrite her story. At home, Lila stepped into the porch light, the box glinting like a vow. I offered hot cocoa, a bedtime story, anything to ease the day's sting. No, Mom, she said, her gaze steady. I need to get ready. She moved with purpose, laying her emerald dress across her chair, its folds a banner of her strength. It was the dress she'd worn when Noah signed her adoption papers, a thread tying her to that promise. I watched, my throat tight, seeing not just my daughter, but a warrior claiming her ground. Noah caught me in the hallway, my hands twisting a dish towel, my mind racing. She means it, Elena, he said, his voice low, resolute. I told her the box is hers to use when she's ready. I searched his face, my voice trembling. What if Maggie breaks her? Noah, what if... He stopped me, his hand steady on mine. Lila's not breaking. She's doing this for herself. His words landed like truth, unshakable. I'd spent years shielding Lila, thinking my silence protected her. But she was leading now, and I had to follow. In her room, Lila perched on her bed, the box beside her, its silver catching the lamplight. I brushed her curls, the familiar rhythm grounding us. She looked at Noah, her voice clear. Is it still okay? Dad. To give it to her, he knelt, his eyes warm, unwavering. It's your call. Lila always has been. Her smile was small, not the giddy grin of summer picnics, but a quiet certainty, like she'd found her own North Star. She was ready to be seen, not as Maggie's guest, but as a Harper, whole and undeniable. I tucked her in, the box on her nightstand, a silent sentinel. As her breathing softened, I lingered, my heart swollen with pride and fear. Lila's stand was rewriting my own story, showing me that strength wasn't in enduring pain, but in facing it. The potluck, a community affair at Boulder's Rec Center, would be Maggie's stage neighbors. Laughter, her perfect mask. Lila was walking into it, not to beg, but to demand her place. Morning came crisp. Lila rising with purpose. She chose her emerald dress again, its wrinkles a badge of her fight, and added a silver headband, the one from her adoption day, its shine a quiet echo of the box. Noah braided her hair, his hands gentle, his silence full of trust. I packed a peach cobbler for the potluck, my fingers unsteady, not from nerves, but from awe. Lila didn't fidget in the car, her hands still on the box, her eyes fixed forward, a warrior in green. The rec center parking lot buzzed with families, the air thick with barbecue smoke and autumn chill. Maggie's voice floated over the crowd, welcoming guests, her charm a polished shield. Lila stepped out, her dress catching the morning light, the box held like a torch, Noah's hand brushed mine, his grip a silent promise. We weren't just here for food or festivity. We were here for Lila, for the moment she'd chosen to rise. Whatever came next, Maggie's smile, her rage, her denial we'd face it as one. Our family forged not by blood, but by love, ready to stand in Lila's light. The Boulder Rec Center pulsed with the energy of the community potluck. Long tables draped in red and white gingham, piled high with pulled pork, coleslaw, and cherry pies. Kids chased each other across the grass, their shouts blending with the twang of a local band's banjo. Maggie Sullivan glided through the crowd, her pearl necklace catching the sunlight, her voice warm as she greeted neighbors, the picture of generosity. But I, Elena Harper, saw the truth beneath her polish, and my daughter was about to lay it bare. Lila stood near our table, her emerald green dress a vivid contrast to the casual jeans around her, the silver-wrapped box clutched tight. Her eyes locked on Maggie. Noah and I lingered close, our hands touching. Our breaths synced in quiet anticipation. The meal wound down, and Maggie took her moment, stepping to the center, her smile commanding silence. A little family tradition, she announced, pulling out gifts. Sophie bounded up, tearing into a custom hoodie, her name stitched in silver, drawing claps. Ethan got one too, his in bold green, sparking cheers. Then Maggie turned to Lila, her smile stiffening, and offered a plastic keychain, its Colorado flag chipped and dull. "Here you go, dear," she said, her tone flat, as if Lila were an afterthought. Lila took it, setting it aside without a glance, her face calm but her eyes blazing. The crowd chattered on, blind to the slight, but Lila stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the noise like a bell. "Grandma," she said, "Dad told me to give you this when you make me feel like I'm not family." She placed the silver box on the table, its shine a challenge in the morning light. The world stopped. The band's strumming faded, forks stilled, and whispers snaked through the crowd. Maggie's hand froze mid-gesture, her eyes narrowing, her laugh thin as cracked ice. "What's this, Lila?" she asked, her voice too bright, her fingers twitching. Lila stood firm, her gaze unyielding, daring Maggie to face it. Neighbors leaned in, sensing a shift, their murmurs falling silent. Noah's grip on my hand tightened, his pulse racing with mine. I couldn't breathe, my eyes fixed on Lila, my daughter, a spark ready to ignite. Maggie lifted the box, her hands unsteady, her smile a fraying thread. "Just a game." "Right," she said, tearing the wrapping with forced ease, her eyes flicking to the crowd for support. None came. The lid opened, revealing a framed photo Noah cradling 3-year-old Lila at her adoption party, her smile wide, cake on her cheeks. The caption, "Day 1, Dad in gold." Below it, adoption papers. The judge's seal stark. Noah's name as father. Then a letter, folded tight, in Noah's steady hand. Maggie's face drained, her breath shallow as she unfolded the letter, her lips moving silently. "Mom, Lila is my daughter. By love and law, your refusal to embrace her breaks us. If you can't love her fully, we're through." The paper trembled, falling to the table. Her eyes widened, her composure crumbling, and then she screamed a raw, piercing wail that shattered the potluck's warmth. Louder than the music, louder than the gasps, louder than the stunned silence that followed. "You're humiliating me," she cried, her necklace askew, her voice a broken thing. The crowd stood rigid, neighbors clutching napkins, kids frozen mid-step. Sophie hugged her hoodie, bewildered, Ethan stared, his fork dangling. Maggie stumbled back, her hands shaking, her voice a hiss. "This is cruel!" Noah rose, his voice low, unyielding. "You chose this, Mom, not Lila." I felt a surge of fire, pride and pain intertwined, as Lila watched, her face steady, her eyes clear. The box had spilled more than paper, it had spilled truth, raw and fierce. Maggie's scream echoed. But Lila's courage roared louder, a sound that would linger long after the crowd dispersed. A cold wind swept through Boulder a week after the potluck, rattling the windows of our home as Claire Sullivan knocked on our door, her scarf tight, her eyes restless. Elena Harper. Let her in. My stomach nodding at the sight of Noah's sister. Her presence a reminder of the fault lines Maggie had carved. Lila was upstairs, coloring in her room, while Noah sat at the dining table, papers spread before him, his pen still. Claire didn't sit, her voice sharp. That stunt at the potluck went too far. "Elena, Lila shamed Mom in front of everyone." My jaw tightened, but Noah spoke first, his tone low, unyielding. "Mom shamed herself. Claire." Lila just held up a mirror. Claire's hands clenched, her voice rising. "She's trying, Noah. She loves Lila, just in her own way." I stepped forward, my anger flaring, my words steady but hot. Her own way. A chipped keychain while Sophie gets a monogrammed hoodie, calling Lila not ours, behind her back. Claire's eyes widened, her certainty wavering. Noah opened his laptop, pulling up photos Sophie's new skates, Ethan's signed football, Lila's thrift store puzzle with missing pieces. Each image was a scar, proof of Maggie's divide. Claire's breath hitched, her fingers trembling. "I didn't see it like that," she whispered, her voice cracking. Noah's gaze softened. But his words cut true. "Lila's my daughter. Claire, by every measure. Mom's had years to accept her. She chose not to." Claire sank onto the couch, her face pale, her hands twisting her scarf. She left without a word, but her silence felt different, heavy with doubt. 3 days later, her text came, short and urgent. "Chautauqua Park, tomorrow. I'm bringing Mom. We fix this." Lila, overhearing, clutched her family tree poster, her voice firm. "I'm going. Mom, I want her to see." Noah nodded, his hand on mine, his eyes steady. We were ready, not for peace, but for clarity. The park stretched wide under a slate-gray sky, the flatirons stark against the horizon, the air sharp with winter's edge. Maggie stood by a wooden bench, her coat cinched, her face a wall of defiance. Claire, beside her, shifted nervously, clutching Lila's poster. Lila, in her emerald green dress beneath a jacket, held her head high, her poster a shield. Maggie spoke first, her voice icy. "You've poisoned everyone against me. Elena, this is your doing." I faced her, my voice calm, cutting. "No, Maggie. You built this when you told Lila she's outside our family." Claire stepped in, her voice trembling but clear. "Mom, I kept Lila's family tree. It's her family, and you threw it away. Why can't you love her like Sophie and Ethan?" Maggie's eyes flashed. Her words a whip. "She's not mine, Claire. She's Noah's choice." The word landed like a stone, heavy and cruel. Lila's face didn't falter, her eyes locked on Maggie, steady as stone. Claire's tears fell, her voice breaking. "That's not love, Mom. That's you deciding who counts." Maggie's facade splintered, her hands shaking, her voice a raw whisper. "I can't. I don't know how to fit her in. No apology, no step toward Lila, just a confession of her limits. She turned, her steps heavy, disappearing into the park's chill. Claire stayed, clutching the poster, her sobs quiet. Lila looked at us, her voice soft, certain. I know my family now. We walked away, Noah's arm around me, Lila's hand in mine, the cold air lighter with each step. Claire's stand didn't heal Maggie, but it freed us, a new line drawn, not in anger, but in truth. Winter settled over Boulder like a soft blanket, the quiet after the potluck and park showdown bringing a calm I hadn't felt in years. Maggie Sullivan's absence left a hollow, but it wasn't loss, it was room to breathe. I, Elena Harper, watched Lila dance through our living room, her laughter a melody, her steps free of the weight she'd carried. She no longer scanned the doorway for Maggie's approval, her eyes bright with a new kind of peace. Noah and I felt it too, a lightness, as if we'd shed a shadow we'd clung to too long. Lila blossomed in that freedom. One chilly afternoon, a small envelope arrived, addressed to her in a child's scrawl. Inside was a silver bracelet, its heart charm catching the kitchen light, paired with a note from Sophie. "You're my sister, forever." It read, "I saved my allowance for this." Sorry, Grandma wasn't kind. Lila's eyes sparkled as she read it, slipping the bracelet on, its gleam a quiet vow. She wore it daily, not asking permission, the heart a reminder of a bond Maggie couldn't break. That simple gift, born of a child's love, outshone every lavish trinket Maggie ever gave. Claire, Noah's sister, reached out too, her texts tentative but warm. She sent Lila a watercolor set, a silent amends for years of looking away. I saw her grappling with Maggie's legacy, trying to step out of it. It wasn't full redemption, but it was a start, a flicker of hope we didn't chase. Our world was here, in our home, where Lila's giggles filled the corners Maggie left empty. We didn't need her stage anymore. Noah changed most of all. The man who once balanced his mother's expectations against his daughter's heart now stood unburdened, his eyes clear. One night, I found him by Lila's bed, watching her sleep, the bracelet glinting on her wrist. "I waited too long," he whispered, his voice thick. I touched his shoulder, my heart full. "You gave her what she needed when she needed it. That silver box, his gift to Lila, wasn't just a letter or papers, it was power, her right to demand her place. And he'd handed it to her without hesitation. We wove new traditions, small but fierce. Lila helped us bake blueberry muffins for neighbors, her hands sticky with batter, her laughter louder than the oven's hum. We hung lanterns in the backyard for game nights. Lila sprawled across a quilt, challenging us to Uno, her grin unstoppable. Her family tree poster hung above her desk, framed, its glitter a badge of her truth. These moments weren't Maggie's grand displays. They were ours, built on love, not conditions. Lila's courage reshaped me. I'd taught her to be polite, to accept Maggie's crumbs, thinking it built character. But her stand at the potluck, her unflinching gaze in the park, showed me strength isn't silence, it's speaking, even when your voice shakes. She didn't need Maggie's love to know her worth. She claimed it, and in doing so, freed Noah and me to claim ours. Family isn't a name or blood, it's who holds you when the world turns cold, who sees you when you feel invisible. Here's what I carry now. Lessons etched like Lila's bracelet, small but shining. First, own your worth. Lila's box was her voice saying, "I am enough. No one should dim their light to fit another's frame." Second, choose love over legacy. Family is who claims you, Noah choosing Lila. Sophie choosing her sister, not who shares your roots. Third, bravery sparks change. Lila's small stand cracked open a truth Maggie hid, proving one voice can shift everything.
I believe kids like Lila teach us to be fearless, to face the pain we'd rather ignore. Her refusal to stay unseen pushed us to cut away what hurt, to build something true. If this story lights something in you, if it echoes a moment you stood tall or longed to, share it with someone who needs it. Drop your story in the comments. I read them all, and they matter. Let's lift up the voices that demand to be heard, because the smallest hearts can burn the brightest.